So the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored how crucial infrastructure is to making our economy and our communities work. And that includes the roads and buses that Americans take to work or to school. But it also includes the childcare that allows parents to go to work and the high-speed internet that allows our kids to rely on for their studies. And yet our investments in all of that vital infrastructure have been both inadequate and inequitable. So take our roads, which are earned a D on the most recent infrastructure report card from the American Society for Civil Engineers. 1 out of every 5 miles of American highways and roads is in poor condition. So we're failing to adequately fund basic road maintenance and repairs, much less invest in transit modernization and electrification. It holds back our economy. This contributes to climate crisis. It harms public health, especially in minority communities. Ms. Sheehan, you have worked for over a decade on public transit, including bridges and highways in Massachusetts. So let me ask you, would large-scale investments in transit electrification help communities across the country?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator, and the answer is yes. Transit agencies and DOTs are embracing electrification. I believe at this point, transit agencies in over 40 states have chosen to pursue electric bus purchases despite the higher initial purchase prices, because the benefits justify that additional investment with significant cost savings in terms of operations because of the increased fuel efficiency. So it's about a 78% lower lifetime fuel cost compared to traditional vehicles. But most importantly, these vehicles are quieter, and there's 100% reduction in tailpipe emissions, which improves quality of life for everyone who lives adjacent to public transit routes. And that's why states are continuing to pursue these investments.
So thank you. That's very helpful, Ms. Sheehan. Here we are falling behind on these investments. We need to go big to combat climate change and to grow our economy. Now, President Biden has proposed investing $174 billion in vehicle electrification, which is a good start. The Build Green Infrastructure and Jobs Act that I introduced with Senator Markey and Representatives Levin and Ocasio-Cortez would invest $500 billion over 10 years to help us get to all-electric public vehicles and rail. My forthcoming Buy Green Act with Congressman Levin will establish a further $1.5 trillion in federal procurement to purchase American-made clean energy products for federal, state, and local use and for export. Ms. Buck, let me ask you, you worked with local governments all across the country. Can we rely on local government to generate the revenue needed to make these big investments in transit modernization and electrification, or does the federal government need to step up if we're going to make this happen?
Chair Wyden, Senator Warren, while we are doing our part on the local level, counties are limited in a variety of ways from raising any local revenue. We rely on the strength of the intergovernmental partnership to deliver this critical infrastructure projects that our residents need and expect. Counties urge Congress to direct funds to locally owned infrastructure that will allow us to better meet the needs of our community.
Good. Thank you. I agree with you on this. President Biden has proposed raising taxes on the wealthy and on giant corporations to pay for these vital investments in our nation's infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Republicans have proposed imposing user fees and fuel taxes rather than raise taxes on the wealthy and on big corporations. So, Dr. Kyle, let me ask you a question around this. Let's assume that a school teacher making the average teaching salary in Massachusetts and a CEO making millions of dollars a year both have the same distance to drive as their commute to work, and they use the same number of gallons of gas a year. Which one of them pays more as a share of their income when we pay for infrastructure investments by imposing a gasoline tax?
So, Senator, gasoline taxes tend to be regressive in that they impose a larger burden in terms of share of income that goes to pay for those taxes on people in the lower and middle income quintiles than they do on the upper income quintiles.
You just said in a fancier way. So the school teacher pays more as a share of his or her income than the wealthy person does if you use these user fees. I hope I got that right. Is that right, Dr. Kyle?
Yes, in the scenario you had, that was correct.
Good. You know, it is absurd to suggest that we should finance this investment on the backs of school teachers and firefighters and small business owners. President Biden and I have both put forward full menus of options for paying for these long overdue investments in our shared infrastructure, options that are not going to hurt the very people who are struggling the most to recover from this pandemic. My wealth tax, real corporate profits tax, tax enforcement plan, those three things would raise $6 trillion without raising taxes on 99.9% of Americans by a single penny. And that's enough to pay for every penny of President Biden's American Jobs Plan, to pay for every single penny of his American Families Plan, and to still have $2 trillion left over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great.